In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal farajahum. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For this last and final lecture in our series for Muharram this year, we have received a number of questions and inquiries and a lot of interest about a number of topics related to the historical events of Karbala, the sequence of events, and some of the details related to some of the personalities and the mission or the movement and the purposes of the movement of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And so we thought that it would be timely to try to address as many of these as possible and present them in a way that, inshallah, will prepare us as we are about to listen to the maqtal, to the telling of the tragedy, the narrative of the tragedy on the 10th of Muharram, that will be tomorrow, inshallah. And so this will provide the context and the historical overview of the events that led to that day. We can perhaps begin by ensuring that, of course, what we are telling here and over the nights is always a summary or an overview of the events, that there are always a lot more details that we can cover if we had more time, and that there are at times related to a lot of the events that we're talking about, the personalities that we're talking about, the details that we're presenting, there are oftentimes different points of view between scholars that we don't always have time to present. And so if we are only given the opportunity to present things once, it makes a lot more sense to present things in the way that is most traditional, so that everyone at least gets the same foundation, and then we leave the other alternatives, the minority opinions, the divergent points of view, to more advanced discussions once the basics have been understood by all. And usually in these settings we don't have time to get into the more detailed discussions and the different points of views related to a lot of these details that we talk about. That's the first point. The second point has to do, and this is something that there were some questions and interests about this year specifically, and it leads to a bit of a misconception. The way that we have traditionally, as communities of lovers and followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, presented the tragedy of Karbala, we presented over 10 nights. And usually we all know that there are nights that are dedicated to specific personalities. So we might say, for instance, on the 6th night, the 7th night, the 8th night, it might be dedicated to the companions or to Ali al-Akbar or to Al-Qasim or to Al-Abbas. And this seems to create a little bit of confusion at times for those who perhaps have less of an understanding of the historical sequence of events, giving the impression that perhaps the martyrdoms of these individuals are taking place on those nights, when in reality this is something of a convention that the communities of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam have simply come up with over time, And even then, there are some differences between the communities where they do not all use the same nights and dedicate them to the same personalities all over the world. Sometimes there are differences, and this is simply a matter of convention. Otherwise, the actual tragedy of Karbala took place, the actual tragedy leading to the killing of Imam al Husain alayhi salam happened in a few hours. It started in the morning of the 10th of Muharram, and Imam al Husain alayhi salam was killed and his soul departed from this world after Asr and before sunset. That's the entirety of the event of the tragedy of Karbala. And of course there are things that happen, and inshallah today we'll try to present a quick overview of those events that happened between the 2nd of Muharram all the way until the 10th of Muharram. But the actual tragedy and all these personalities that we are discussing, they were all martyred. They all presented themselves to fight before Imam al Husain alayhi salam, all of them on the 10th of Muharram. Otherwise there was no martyrdom and no killing and no big battles that led to martyrdom on the nights before, except for the big fight or the big battle that took place in Kufa, and we spoke about that. There's a question that also has to do with the rising of Imam al Husain alayhi salam specifically, and why at that time. We have 12 Imams, and we see that Imam al Husain alayhi salam is the only one who seems to have been leading this type of revolution. And even Imam al Husain alayhi salam lived a full life before the revolution of Karbala, and he never led this type of revolution before. The movement of Imam al Husain alayhi salam seems to have happened very quickly towards the end of his life, leading to the tragedy of Karbala. So this triggers a lot of questions. Why did Imam al Husain alayhi salam rise? And why did Imam al Husain alayhi salam rise specifically at this point, not before? And so there are different ways where we can try to understand the movement of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. One way to do this is to go back to the purpose that Imam al Husain explained for this entire movement of his. And the Imam gave multiple purposes. If we go back to the sermons he gave, the letters he wrote, the meetings he had with different personalities, Imam al Husain alayhi salam gave us multiple reasons. One of the reasons can be brought down to the corruption of Bani Umayyah. Bani Umayyah were an extremely oppressive, unjust regime, oppressive to the people. They would confiscate property, wealth, they would kill, they would tell everyone who is supposed to be a citizen of their empire that they are mere slaves who belong to them and their properties and their lives all belong to them, and that they can do with whomever they want, whatever they want. And then in addition to this general attitude of Bani Umayyah at that time, there is the extra oppression and harshness and violence against the lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and anyone who gives the impression that they sympathize with Imam Ali alayhi salam and the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And this is something that had started as quite horrific and quite awful, but then grew in violence and harshness and importance until it reached a peak at the time of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And this can be considered one of the reasons that the Imam rises. A second reason that the Imam explains has to do with guiding people and making sure that people understand what is truth and be able to distinguish it from what is non-truth. And this is perhaps what we find in one of the ziyarat of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, when he talks about Imam al Husain alayhi salam and his rising, when he says that the reason that Imam al Husain alayhi salam rose was that ليستنقذ عبادك من الضلالة أو من الجهالة وحيرة الضلالة أو حيرة الضلالة, so that he may rescue your servants from ignorance and from the loss of misguidance. So there is a guidance role that the Imam alayhi salam is playing to ensure that people understand what is truth and be able to distinguish it and follow it. We also have narrations, and the Imam explained this in some of his letters and some of his speeches, saying that when the people came to the Imam asking the Imam to become their leader and to be the one who takes over the political rule for them at their request, and that they want him to lead by following the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the tradition of the Holy Prophet, that this is exactly the duty of an Imam. And the Imam said that. He said, I swear that this is exactly the duty that an Imam is supposed to perform, and since you have asked me, I have to comply. I have to come to you and respond to your request, even though the Imam knew that they may betray. But because they asked the Imam in this way and sent him the letters, as we said, at least representing 12,000 people only from Kufa, then the Imam saw that this is now a duty, that the people, it is as though they are voting for the Imam, asking the Imam to come and rule by the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the tradition of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we can add also specifically why at this time, and specifically why with Yazid. And this is the key. There are a few things to understand about Yazid that make him very different from everything else. And this is very short. Politically speaking, Imam al Husain alayhi salam had put in place a treaty, forced upon Muawiyah a treaty, in which Muawiyah complied that if he is to die, the rule, the Khilafah must go to Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And in case Imam al Husain alayhi salam is not alive, then the rule must go to Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And now Muawiyah has just died. And everyone knows that there is a treaty that has been approved and signed by Muawiyah and Bani Umayyah, that the rule must now legitimately go to Imam al Husain alayhi salam. He is the only legitimate Khalifa. This has been known for many years. And this is why Imam al Husain alayhi salam, even though he had exchanges with Muawiyah for the 10 years that he was an Imam in Medina, he never rose, he never led any movement against Muawiyah, because there is a deal that Muawiyah will remain in power until his death. Even though the Imam was very harsh and very blunt in his letters to Muawiyah and in the back and forth that happened with Muawiyah. But there is a deal, and the Imam respected it and honored it, and it's well known in the Islamic world. So when Muawiyah dies, the Imam cannot accept that the entire deal goes out the window and his son Yazid is forced upon everyone as a Khalifa, when there is a peace treaty that included him becoming the ruler that has been known by the Islamic world for years. And then, religiously speaking, the difference between Yazid and everyone before him is that Yazid is openly non-Islamic. There is nothing about Yazid that gives the impression that this is an Islamic leader, someone who can actually lead Islam, an Islamic ruler. Perhaps with others before him, with all the wrongs that they did, in appearance, they looked like they were respecting the rules of Islam, the laws of Islam. Yazid was the first to come to the throne, to become the political ruler over Islam, yet he broke every Islamic rule. The most basic of the foundations of Islam were broken by Yazid, including drinking publicly, for instance, and wearing gold and silk, and playing with monkeys and cats, and so on and so forth. This was all well known. And that's why even Bani Umayyah had trouble with Yazid becoming their own Khalifa. They could see that he is going way too far, even in his public image, to rule over Islam, when he is this type of personality who conducts himself in this way. If it was possible before to pretend, with Yazid it's not even possible to pretend that this is going to be an Islamic ruler. And these are some of the reasons why Imam al Husain alayhi salam rose at this specific time. The Imam summarized all of this in one word, and we introduced the whole series with that word. And we said the Imam rose for reform. The word reform that we used, or islah that the Imam used in his own speeches, includes all of these notions. The notion of religious guidance, the notion of the fixing of the corruption of Bani Umayyah, and so on and so forth. Now, the next question is, was Imam al Husain alayhi salam successful or not in his movement? And here again, we could spend a lot of time, I don't have time to do this, going through, for instance, some of the political events that started to happen, and the social events and the religious events that started to happen like dominoes after the event of Karbala. Clearly, there are people who woke up. Clearly, there are people who regretted not helping Imam al Husain alayhi salam. Clearly, there are people who felt that they had been misguided. They never thought that the events would lead all the way to the killing of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. This seems to have been a general theme. We would not say that there was a full awakening of the Islamic world. We can't go that far. But there was clearly a before and after Karbala. That's one way to look at it. And so we could go, for instance, through the political and social revolutions that happened in the past. We've talked about each one of these revolutions, the Tawabun, Al-Mukhtar, and others, and what they did and what they tried to do, and all of this can be considered extensions of the movement of Imam al Husain alayhi salam, or reactions to it. I'll go instead to a hadith. At the time of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, the son of Imam al Husain, when he went back to Al-Madinah al-Munawwara, when he was living in Al-Madinah, he tried to stay secluded from Bani Umayyah, and Bani Umayyah tried to leave him alone. After the tragedy of Karbala, Bani Umayyah wanted to give the impression that it was never Yazid who gave the instructions to kill Imam al Husain alayhi salam. It was not his command. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, the governor, himself, by himself, on his own, is the one who decided to go too far and to kill Imam al Husain alayhi salam, because there was a general revolt against Bani Umayyah at that time. So Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, to a certain point, they left him alone, not to make things worse, but the Imam knew that he was always under threat, and he stayed alone as well. And that's one of the roles that Sayyidah Zainab played at that time, that she became the face. She was the one who was dealing with people, answering questions, spreading knowledge. And Imam Sajjad alayhi salam focused more publicly on the spiritual dimension of Islam. But he was still being harassed and still being taunted by Bani Umayyah. And so in one occasion, we're told Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was on the back of a camel, when on the other side there's one of the leaders of Bani Umayyah who passed by. And so to harass the Imam, they told him, by the way, we heard that your father went out trying to fight against the Khalifa of his time. What happened in the end? Did he win or lose? Was he successful or not? This is after the tragedy of Karbala. And they say Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam simply told him, to know if my father, Al-Husayn ibn Ali, won or lost, was successful or not, the next time you perform your prayer, look at whether you're going to read the adhan and the iqamah or not. And that's all he said. And the Imam is basically telling him, if there are still people performing the prayer, and there are still people reciting the adhan and the iqamah, that means Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam won. Which is a clear indication from Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam where Islam had reached. What had happened to Islam at the time of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam? That he thought that he had to put himself on the line in this way and to sacrifice the sacrifices that he made in order to preserve this religion and to keep it going. And this is inshallah a lesson to us all too. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam sacrificed all of this so that we continue to pray, and we continue to recite the adhan, and we continue to recite the iqamah based on this hadith from Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. There's a lot more that we can say about this, but I think I'll start to turn towards the events. So we said Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was living in Al-Madinah al-Munawwara for about 10 years as an imam after the imamah of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. After Imam al-Hasan was martyred, poisoned and martyred. At the end of the 10 years, Muawiyah dies. During his last few years, he was trying to force a bay'ah, an allegiance to be given to his son to become the Khalifa. But this has not reached areas like Al-Madinah and Mecca and the major centers of the Islamic world yet. When Muawiyah dies, the instructions start to come to the governors of these lands to force certain personalities to give their allegiance immediately. The most important of which is Imam al Husain alayhi salam. That if Imam al Husain alayhi salam gives his allegiance, great. If not, kill him. In fact, in the instructions that he gave to the governor, to Al-Walid, he told him, send me his head. So Imam al Husain alayhi salam is in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. The instructions come. We went through the stories where Imam al Husain alayhi salam is summoned to the castle of the governor. He refuses and he starts to give clear indications that he is not going to pay allegiance to Yazid. About 2 days later, Imam al Husain alayhi salam has left Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara towards Mecca. Mecca was the second center of the Islamic world at that time, with many of the Prophet's companions, many important personalities, and a gathering point for the Islamic world. And so we can also understand this move from Imam al Husain alayhi salam at multiple levels. He is seeking protection and safety, as this is supposed to be a safe sanctuary for someone who is now being hunted to be killed. But this is also a gathering point for the Islamic world. And so if Imam al Husain alayhi salam has any messages to spread, this would be the exact location from which to do it. And so Imam al Husain alayhi salam spent about 4 months in Mecca, 4 months and 10 days. And he went right before the pilgrimage season. And he went through the height of the Umrah season. So this is an excellent time to meet with people, to understand what is going on. And this is exactly what happened, with history telling us that Imam al Husain alayhi salam was very active during the time that he was in Mecca, meeting people day and night, receiving delegations and receiving a lot of the letters and delegations from Kufa. The messengers were coming from Kufa, many of them with oral letters, others with written letters and documents from the tribes of Kufa and elsewhere. And he was also in contact with Basra and elsewhere. And that's when Imam al Husain alayhi salam asked his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil to go to Kufa to prepare the ground for him, to see if the interest in Kufa is sincere and true, and to start preparing the ground for the Imam to come and take over as ruler. And the Imam sent messengers to Kufa and to Basra. And perhaps he may have sent messengers elsewhere. Those are the ones that are documented in history. And then while in Mecca, Imam al Husain alayhi salam starts to feel the pressure of Bani Umayyah, who are now starting to send people to try to assassinate the Imam while he is in Mecca. And we're told that there were 30 assassins who were inside the Kaaba trying to kill Imam al Husain alayhi salam at the very end. And so the Imam changed his Hajj, interrupted his Hajj. He did not perform the Hajj, and on the 8th of the Hijjah he leaves the Kaaba and he leaves Mecca towards Al-Kufa. There are minor skirmishes back and forth with the forces of the governor of Mecca, but Imam al Husain alayhi salam continues on his journey. Along the way, as we explained, there were 35 stations, and it's a long journey that Imam al Husain alayhi salam traveled in a very short period of time. He traveled 1,450 kilometers in 25 days with a large caravan, with children and women. They're not all warriors. And the caravan was originally much bigger. Those who initially wanted to be with Imam al Husain alayhi salam were very many. But even the first sermon that the Imam delivered as he was leaving, about to depart from Mecca, it started to give indications that the Imam is not going on this journey for any worldly gains. And so some people already started to leave the Imam. And then along the way, there were some milestones. For instance, one of the great companions of the Imam, one of the great heroes of Karbala, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, joins the Imam at that time. The Imam meets with some important personalities, Al-Farazdaq and others. There's a back and forth. There are people who are coming from Kufa about to enter Mecca. We're even told that the Imam did not use the normal roads to go back to Kufa. He used the roads that people use to enter into Mecca so that he encounters everyone coming to Mecca so that he can talk to them. They say it's a deviation of 9 kilometers from the road. In any case, the Imam continues on this journey until the news starts to come that his messengers have been captured and have been killed by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And that even his representative Muslim ibn Aqil and the people working with him, such as Hani ibn Urwa, have all been captured by Ibn Ziyad, and Muslim has been killed and Hani has been killed. Imam al Husain alayhi salam delivered a sermon at that point to tell people that the messengers have been killed, that we are headed towards a very different scenario and a very different outcome than we initially thought. And anyone who wants to leave may leave. And many people left. And the caravan got a lot smaller. And that's when we see people like Zuhair and others step up and deliver sermons telling Imam al Husain alayhi salam that they would rather stay with him no matter what to expect at the end. Imam al Husain alayhi salam continues on his journey. During this time, Yazid has written to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, his governor in Basra, telling him and choosing him specifically because of how ruthless and violent he is, telling him that Imam al Husain has become your problem now. He's headed in your direction. If you want to maintain your titles and your prestige and your roles in our government, then deal with him and kill him, unless he gives us his allegiance. Otherwise, you are going back to what you used to be. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad moves very quickly. He starts to send the commanders to start blocking the roads. And then he travels to Kufa to deal with the uprising of Muslim ibn Aqil. And we know the details around all of that. He killed as many as he could. He imprisoned as many as he could. And he started to prepare an army to go towards the same way that Imam al Husain alayhi salam is coming from. And at that time, this is when Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi was sent to block the way from Imam al Husain alayhi salam and to force the Imam to come specifically to the area where Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and his forces and the forces of Bani Umayyah could control militarily the situation and enter into forcing Imam al Husain alayhi salam to either give his allegiance or be killed. By the time Imam al Husain alayhi salam reaches Karbala and he asks about the name of this land, he is given multiple names, as we said. The Imam reaches on the 2nd of Muharram, year 61 after Hijrah. One of the names that is given to this area is An-Nawawis. And this is an important term, as are some of the others. Maybe a quick remark about this one, and we continue in the future, inshallah. We'll spend more time on this. It is clear that part of what was in Karbala, there were plains, and Imam al Husain alayhi salam chose a location where he thought that his caravan and his camp would not be exposed from all areas. It was a very wise location from the Imam, and that the Imam proceeded to purchase that land for 60,000 from the neighboring villages so that he owns this entire land. And inshallah in the future we'll talk more about this. But there were monasteries and a cemetery that belonged to the Christians there. And this is something that I think we need to dig into historically, to see who were these people and why were they there. And perhaps this has to do with ancient prophecies that the Christians knew about, that are mentioned in the books of the Jews and the Christians in the Bible, about a great man who would be the son of a prophet, who would eventually come to this spot on the shores of the Euphrates to lead a great battle, and he will become the sacrifice of God on earth. And so these Christians over the centuries were devoted to this cause, and they had moved to this location to to come and wait for this battle to happen so that they would participate in it and contribute to it and support the cause of truth. Except that it did not happen over centuries, and that's why the old monasteries and the old cemeteries were still there when Imam al Husain alayhi salam arrived. And this might also explain why some of the Christians were so attracted to Imam al Husain alayhi salam and his movement, and they joined his movement without any hesitation, because perhaps they were well aware of their prophecies at that time, and there is ongoing research right now in that area, and inshallah it continues, and in the future we can talk more about it. Imam al Husain alayhi salam writes a famous letter on the 2nd of Muharram to Bani Hashim that reaches Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah at that time on the 2nd of Muharram, telling him it is as though the world never was, and it is as though the hereafter has always been, and peace. And that's all the Imam says in that letter. At that time, on the 2nd of Muharram, there is only the soldiers of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, about 1,000 men, in front of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. In the meantime, Umar ibn Sa'd, who was supposed to be a military commander under Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, had already received instructions to go and fight a small group of people on the Persian side and deal with the revolution, a very small revolution, deal with them and then become the governor over the province called Al-Ray. But when Imam al Husain alayhi salam came and the incidents happened, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad asked Umar ibn Sa'd to go deal with Imam al Husain alayhi salam first, and when that is done, to go and deal with that second minor revolution and then become the governor over Ray. Umar ibn Sa'd did not want to have anything to do with Imam al Husain alayhi salam. Umar ibn Sa'd knows exactly who Imam al Husain alayhi salam is. He's supposed to be the son of one of the big companions of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He grew up in this Islamic world. It's not someone who doesn't know, who comes from the outside. So he wanted nothing to do with Imam al Husain alayhi salam or having his blood on his hands. So he tried to find an excuse, and in fact he asked directly Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to excuse him from this mission, and he will deal with all the rest. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad told him, no problem, give me back the letter of appointment that I gave you to become governor. I'll put someone else as a governor. He told him, give me 1 day to think about it. He went back, he spoke to all the members of his family, people he trusted. Every single person told him, whatever you do, do not fight Imam al Husain alayhi salam. This is clearly a sin. This is clearly something wrong. Umar ibn Sa'd came back the next day and he told him, of course I will do it. And so he was given 4,000 men and he was dispatched from Kufa to head towards Karbala. And on the 3rd day he reaches Karbala, the 3rd of Muharram. So now this is the first group that joins with 4,000 soldiers in addition to the 1,000 of Hurr. Now we have 5,000, and very quickly afterwards a Shimr arrives with another 4,000 men. And the numbers escalate quickly by 2,000 and 4,000 to about 22,000 that accumulated very quickly. And then there are reports that Bani Umayyah also sought the help of the Romans to fight Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And this is where there is a discrepancy, there's a difference between the different versions of history, and the numbers go anywhere between 22,000 to the 70,000 that we hear that faced Imam al Husain alayhi salam on the 10th of Muharram. Now we're on the 3rd of Muharram. On the 3rd of Muharram, as soon as Umar ibn Sa'd arrives, Imam al Husain alayhi salam starts to have talks with him. He starts to negotiate to see what is all of this gathering of soldiers that is happening. There is no need for any of this. It is your people of Kufa who have asked me to come. There are alternatives if you don't want me to, or they don't no longer want me to rule. I can go back from where I came from, back and forth. Imam al Husain alayhi salam went out with 20 of his men. He met Umar ibn Sa'd with 20 of his men. And there are perhaps 3 or 4 other attempts of negotiations that happened between this 3rd day and around the 7th day of Muharram. And all of them clearly failed. There are attempts that were made by some of the companions of Imam al Husain alayhi salam to negotiate something. They came, they advised, they preached so that this army does not fight Imam al Husain alayhi salam. They go back, they come back to their senses. That did not work as well. And Umar ibn Sa'd wrote a letter to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. In fact, this went on, and he sent different letters to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad trying to tell him of the progress of what was happening. And the situation was clearly getting worse. And Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was stubbornly wanting to lead the situation towards the killing of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And during this time, there were guarantees that were offered to a number of people, including Al-Abbas, including Ali al-Akbar, including a number of the companions of the Imam. They told them, just leave the Imam and we guarantee your safety, because of their tribal connections, because of their mothers, because of other reasons. And of course, all of them stuck with Imam al Husain alayhi salam. On the 5th of Muharram, this is the day that we are told Habib ibn Mudahir joins Imam al Husain alayhi salam. Habib was in Kufa. When Imam al Husain first arrived at Karbala, he set out 12 banners for his small army. And one of the banners, everyone was competing to carry a banner. And one banner was put aside, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam told them that the one who carries this banner has not come yet. He will come later. So when Habib came on the 5th of Muharram, this gave great happiness to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and everyone in the camp to see this great man come. Habib ibn Mudahir was a companion of the Holy Prophet, a close companion of Imam Ali, Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Husayn. He was a 75-year-old man. He was considered a faqih, he was considered a reciter and a teacher of the Holy Quran, and so on and so forth. A great personality, greatly respected by Imam Ali alayhi salam, by Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. By the 6th of Muharram, the army under Umar ibn Sa'd was becoming complete. When Habib ibn Mudahir, who is from Bani Asad, noticed the large amounts of people who are gathering against Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, he told the Imam, I know some villages around here from Bani Asad and others. I will try to go convince them to join us. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam told him, go ahead. And so between the 5th and about the 7th of Muharram, Habib ibn Mudahir went to the neighboring villages to talk to them and to see who would join Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And many of them agreed with Habib, and they started to prepare themselves. And their plan was that they would join the Imam in the middle of the night so that no one would feel it. And as soon as they started to prepare themselves and to move towards the Imam, Umar ibn Sa'd had already dispatched a very large group, thousands of men, to go fight them off. And small fighting occurred, and then Bani Asad went back saying, we have no ability to fight with this very large army, and they went back. And Habib went back to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, either alone or with a few men who were able to join him at that time. And this was all happening, as we said, between the 5th and the 7th of Muharram. On the 7th of Muharram, this is when the water was completely cut off from the camp of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, and the orders came directly from Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. On the 7th and 8th and 9th of Muharram, Imam al-Husayn starts to order some of the leaders under him, mainly Al-Abbas and Ali al-Akbar, to lead what has been called in history as the water skirmishes. These are small battles that Imam al-Husayn's army led to go get water and bring it back to the camp. And so they would go 20 or 30 or even 50 men to go to the water and fight just to bring enough water back to the camp. And they were successful, and they were able to. We know at least of one, if not more times, when Ali al-Akbar did one of these campaigns, and when Al-Abbas did one of these campaigns on the 7th, 8th and 9th of Muharram. On the 9th of Muharram, it's starting to become clear that Umar ibn Sa'd is procrastinating. He really doesn't want to fight with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, and he's finding excuses. The one who noticed this behavior from Umar ibn Sa'd right from the beginning was Shimr. When Shimr arrived, he wanted to be the commander. And he noticed that Umar is being political, and he's finding ways so that this situation does not lead to the killing of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and an outright war. So right away, Shimr had gone back to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and told him that Umar ibn Sa'd has no intention of fighting Hussein. Let me be the commander of your armies. And so Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad wrote a letter giving orders that either you fight Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam or you let go of the command of this army and you give it to Shimr. In the meantime, on the 9th, we're told that there was a letter written by Umar bin Sa'd that had been sent to Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, telling him the negotiations have been fruitful with Imam al Husain alayhi salam, and everything is well, and everything has been fixed, and Imam al Husain alayhi salam has agreed to go back to where he came from, and that he has agreed to pay allegiance to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And some have said that this was a distortion in history. My belief is that Umar bin Sa'd outright lied so that the situation does not escalate into a war. But because of the letters that Shimr came back with and the instructions that Shimr came back with, he was now stuck. So he decided that the fight must go on with Imam al Husain alayhi salam. On the 9th of Muharram, the armies of Umar bin Sa'd under him, the 70,000 soldiers, started to prepare to advance towards Imam al Husain alayhi salam. Imam al Husain asked his brother Al-Abbas to go and negotiate with them so that they would be given a reprieve until the next day, until the next morning. Umar bin Sa'd agreed. And at that time, we're told that Imam al Husain alayhi salam and his companions spent that night in prayer, in worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the last night that they would have to live in this world. Imam al Husain alayhi salam delivered speeches and sermons in which he explained to all of his companions how they would be martyred, how they would leave this world, and also explaining to them their ranks in paradise. Imam al Husain, before doing that, gave a permission to all of his companions to leave. He told them that you have traveled and you have sacrificed and you have worked hard and you have been sincere. There is absolutely no reason for any of you to stay with us. You have done your duty. You don't need to stay any longer. And that's when Zuhair and Habib and others stood and said to Imam al Husain alayhi salam that we swear that if we had to die with you 1,000 times and be killed and be burned and be turned to ashes and be brought to life, and that would happen again and again 1,000 times, we would never leave you. We would stay with you until the end. And so Imam al Husain alayhi salam thanked them for all of that. And then there is the famous story of the companion of Imam al Husain alayhi salam who says that the Imam went outside and he was walking around in the tents in the darkness, and so I followed him to make sure that no harm gets to Imam al Husain alayhi salam in the middle of the night. The Imam was removing the thorns and the bushes, knowing that the children would be running here alone the next day once their tents would be burnt. And so he says, I followed the Imam when he went to the tent of Zainab alayhi salam. When he went to the tent of Zainab, she asked him about the loyalty of his companions and whether they would stay with him until the end. And this companion of Imam al Husain alayhi salam, Nafi', went back running to Habib ibn Mudahir, telling him, Sayyidah Zainab is not sure of our commitment and our loyalty towards Imam al Husain alayhi salam. And so Imam al Husain alayhi salam, at that time, as he is talking to Zainab, Habib ibn Mudahir once goes outside and he calls out, you lions of the deserts, you warriors of the battlefields, come out. And so they all came out, led by Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, who was saying, we hear and we obey my uncle Habib. And he told him, I'm not talking to you, Bani Hashim. May your eyes never have to stay up. Go back and rest. I'm talking to the companions. And then Habib ibn Mudahir spoke to the companions, telling them that Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam is not sure of our commitment and our loyalty. She's not sure that we're going to stay beside Imam al Husain alayhi salam until the end. So they came to the tent of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam to reassure her. In a very detailed passage that is well known, they stood at the tent and Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam was asked by Imam al Husain to come out and talk to them, otherwise they would not calm down. He told her, you household of the messenger of the Holy Prophet, we are your servants and your slaves. We are promising that we shall never cease to help you until the spears that we carry are in the chests of your enemies and the swords that we carry are on the skulls of your enemies. And she was reassured, simply telling him, no matter what, do not leave this lonely stranger alone. And then on the next day, the Battle of Karbala happened. When the battle began, Imam al Husain alayhi salam gave a sermon. A trench was dug. It was lit with fire to protect that side of the camp. And then the battles began. The first group and the first wave was that of the companions of Imam al Husain alayhi salam, who would enter either in groups or in twos and threes and fours, or much larger groups, or enter one by one, until all of the companions of the Imam were killed. And then the family members of Imam al Husain alayhi salam entered into the battlefield one by one, the first being Ali al-Akbar. Once they were all killed, Imam al Husain alayhi salam stood alone with only one man left beside him, and this was his brother Al-Abbas. This was a man of about 34 years old. Imam al Husain alayhi salam is his older brother, 57 years old. Sayyidah Zainab is about 55 or 56. He was the one who was carrying the banner. He was the commander of the army of Imam al Husain alayhi salam. He had asked multiple times the Imam to enter into the battlefield, and the Imam had refused every time. He came once more to the Imam asking him to enter, and the Imam would simply tell him, if you are to enter into this battle, then my entire army will be scattered. Imam al Husain alayhi salam considers Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas to be an entire army. He tells him, if you enter, the army will be scattered. Al-Abbas told him, I'm not entering to fight. My heart cannot take it anymore to hear these children crying out of thirst, dying out of thirst, and I am standing here not doing anything. Allow me to enter simply to get them water. Imam al Husain alayhi salam said, if this is necessary, then enter to get water. And that's why we say that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas never entered the battle of Karbala to fight. The only permission he had from Imam al Husain alayhi salam was to go and get water for the children. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas entered into the battle, and he fought valiantly and bravely. Umar ibn Sa'ad had positioned 4,000 men to protect the water from the men of Imam al Husain alayhi salam to reach it. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was able to remove the 4,000 men off of the water and to reach the water. He filled the water bag, and then he scooped one handful of water to drink and give to himself some strength. At that time, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas remembered the thirst of his brother Imam al Husain alayhi salam, and he said his famous verses of poetry, saying, after Husain, my soul, after Husain, you must become cheap. Make yourself cheap, you have no value. You are about to drink the sweetness and the coldness of water, while here is Husain standing about to drink from the cup of death. I swear that these are not my teachings, these are not my beliefs, nor are they the beliefs of a man who has clarity and insight. And then Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas threw the water and went back, piercing through to go to the camp and to feed the children the water. When he tried to go towards the camp, they blocked the way with the entire army. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas took a different path between the palm trees. And this is where they could try to create situations of cowardice without fighting Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas directly. And so one man was hiding behind a palm tree, waiting for Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas to pass by, and he was able to strike him on his right arm and cut it off. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas continued to proceed, carrying his sword with his left arm. A little bit later, from behind another palm tree, his left arm was cut off. He continued to proceed to the camp, carrying the water bag. At this time, the Maqatil say, the arrows came to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas like rain. There are arrows that landed in his chest, in his throat, and in the water bag. And the water bag got spilled. And there was no more water to bring to the camp. And then an arrow landed in the eye of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, and he could no longer see. No eyes to see, no water to bring back to the camp, no arms to fight with. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas stood still in the middle of the battlefield. When the arrow landed in his eye, they say Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas dismounted from his horse, and he bent down, and he put the tip of the arrow between his knees in order to take it out. That's when a man dared to come to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas from behind and hit him with a pole on his head. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas fell to the ground, crying out for the first time in his life to Imam al Husain alayhi salam as his brother. عليك مني السلام أخي يا حسين. This was the upbringing of al Banin and Imam Ali alayhi salam, teaching Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas to always refer to Imam al Husain alayhi salam as his master, as Sayyidi wa Mawlai. But Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was about to leave this world. So he cried out. Imam al Husain alayhi salam got on his horse and he rushed towards Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, crying out, "Where are you all running away from me when you have killed my brother?" By the time he reaches Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Abu al-Fadl is on the ground. Imam al Husain alayhi salam sees him and cries. No arms, he cannot see, and the water is on the side. Imam al Husain alayhi salam started to walk towards Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Abu al-Fadl can't see. He thinks a man is coming to behead him. So he tells him, "I beg of you, by whoever you worship, give me just a few moments until my brother comes to me, so that I may talk to him and he may talk to me, and I may smell him and he may smell me." Imam al Husain alayhi salam tells him, "Brother Abbas, it is I, your brother Husain." And then Imam al Husain alayhi salam sat beside him, and he took his head and he put it in his lap. And Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas removed his head and put it back on the ground. Imam al Husain alayhi salam did this 3 times. And every time Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas would remove back his head and put it on the ground. And Imam al Husain alayhi salam told him, "Brother Abbas, why are you not letting me put your head in my lap?" And Abu al-Fadl told him, "Now you are putting my head in yours. Who is going to be putting your head in their lap in 1 hour?" Imam al Husain alayhi salam watched as the soul of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas departed. He got up. As he was trying to bring back Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Abu al-Fadl refused, telling him, "I'm too ashamed to go back to the camp after having promised the children, your children, water and not having been able to deliver it. Leave me here." Imam al Husain alayhi salam got up. They say when he got up, he looked like a man with his back broken. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas had just passed away. Imam al Husain alayhi salam started to head back to the camp. As Sayyidah Zainab and the woman started to look at Imam al Husain alayhi salam crying, and they were weeping too, wondering what has happened. Sayyidah Zainab asked her brother Imam al Husain alayhi salam, "Brother Husain, where is our brother Abu al-Fadl?" Imam al Husain alayhi salam did not answer her. And the maqtal, they say, كان يكفكف دموعه بكميه. He was wiping his tears away with his sleeves. And he continued to walk to the camp, not answering Sayyidah Zainab, until he walked to the tent of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, and he pushed the pole holding the tent down, telling Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas has died. As Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam right away said, "How are we lost after you, my brother Abu al-Fadl?" And Imam al Husain alayhi salam said, "Indeed, we are lost without you, my brother Abu al-Fadl." Assalamu ala al-Husain وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.